Hey there, happy 2023. If you are a little bit confused about what the heck is going on in the housing market, you are not alone. So in today's video, I'm going to talk you through not only what happened in the month of December, but also come full circle and talk about 2022 as a whole. Let's dive in. So from a mortgage rate standpoint, we started out where you could get a mortgage under 3% at the start of 2022. And now here we are at the end of 2022, where it's roughly 6%. So that is an astronomical doubling of mortgage rates, which has not happened in history. Now, on top of that, we had prices in the single family world go up roughly 40% year over year, whereas the condos are up about 9% year over year. Add to that the fact that days on market are down substantially, although they are starting to come back up for single family homes. And it's been a pretty crazy year. Now, as far as what's going to happen in 2023, I will be covering that next week. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe down below and you will get notified if you hit that little bell once that video is released. But let's dive into what happened in the month of December. We should be able to take some clues about what we should expect in early 2023. As I mentioned before, mortgage rates had gone up over the course of 2022, but specifically towards the tail end, they actually came down. We were roughly at 7% back in October when they peaked. They came down from 6.5% down to about 6%. Here we are in early January, and they are starting to creep up again, which we'll get into at the end. As far as inventory goes, another substantial drop. We had gone on a pretty stable increase from spring of 2022 until the fall, where we peaked at just over 300 properties. We're all the way down to 264 now. And as I mentioned, we are going to see that even decrease further because of what's going to happen on January 1st, which again, I'll cover at the end of this video. We're down 8% just since November alone. Days on market, again, starting to go up from the single family side, but condos are staying pretty stagnant. So it's very, very strong there. And the prices are pretty reflective of that too. So we're still 9% for the fourth month in a row in the condo world, year over year price growth. But from a single family standpoint, we're still up 39% year over year. And honestly, looking back, I was a little bit surprised. 4 of the last 5 months have been about 39%. So that shows some stability in terms of prices starting to level out. That does not mean we're continuing to go up 39% each month, but the fact that it's relatively unchanged for a number of months means that we are stabilizing. Now, how does that make any sense with what's going on, right? Demand is so low with mortgage rates high. How is it possibly stable and not dropping? Let's talk about why that is a little bit. So as I mentioned in the last video, where we're halfway through December, trying to take a look at what's going on, we have a surprise here. So as I mentioned last video, December, we typically see a drop, right, of roughly 25 to 30+% in the total number of homes that go under contract in November compared to December, 1 month later. Here we have over here off to the right, we actually increased in December this year. That has not happened since before 2019. And I did not track anything before that, so I can't speak to exactly when that would be. But with that out of the way, it's a bit of an anomaly. Now, does that mean that we should expect our normal increase like we see in January, just off to the right of these blue bars, compared to years prior? Honestly, I would suspect no. I think this December was a bit of an anomaly with the interest rate drop. I would expect it to be roughly flat with December versus another increase, just again, based on this history and looking at it. So that was a surprise, especially based on where we were halfway through the month. So that's 2 months in a row where we had a very strong second half when things were looking not as promising. From a sales standpoint, again, if I move my head out of the way, we're pretty stable there for 5-6 months running. And typically that should stay. There's not a drop substantially after we get to the month of January. So we should see a drop next month. But beyond that, we should hopefully get our normal pattern. What's complicating all of this is the inventory, which we're going to get into here in a minute. So from an inventory standpoint, we have been increasing, as I preached in the last few videos. Single family, I thought that we would start to see some softness in pricing. That seemed to be true based off of the pricing drop that we saw in the month of November in the single family space. We'll see that on the next slide. But we came down substantially because of the amount of sales that happened in the month of December in the single family space. We're down to just above 6.5 months of inventory. And once again, if this is your first time seeing this, basically means if there were no more single families that hit the market, it would take 6.5 months to sell out based on the rate of sales of single family homes. So that was maybe a good sign if you are an owner, maybe not such a good sign if you are a buyer, because that softness looks like it was more of a fluke than something we can bank on. And once again here, as I mentioned, in November, we had our first step down in pricing in a very long time. We're right back on track, not just coming back to where we were the month prior, but actually surpassing that. We are at our highest point for median prices in the single family space. Days on market, again, had increased. I would expect, based on inventory being low again and continuing to decrease, that this may start to level back out. And really, I think in the 50 to 60 day range is probably where we stabilize eventually. So we're on track to hopefully see that in the coming months. Condos, same thing. We took another step down in months of inventory because we had such a strong December. Still well below 6 months, which again is the balanced neutral market that we expect. So honestly, owners still have a lot more leverage than I thought they would at this point in the year. As for prices, again, this slow gradual increase versus the rocket ship that we saw on the single family chart speaks to, consistent stable growth versus explosive growth. Now, the theory behind that, stick with me for a minute, with the single family space is twofold. Mostly single families that are being sold have been torn down and rebuilt. These are much bigger, much newer homes, whereas a lot of the condos, even if they are torn down to make a new duplex, there's just a lot more supply that keeps the prices more suppressed there. And there's not a whole lot of that development happening because it's hard to find two owners who want to part with an entire building to develop the whole thing. So ultimately, new construction and the type of clients who are coming in, the buyers that are coming in to be in the new construction singles, are driving that price consistently through the roof. So if you can own the dirt in Ocean City, you do it. You don't think twice. That's been a motto of mine for quite some time. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. Days on market, again, consistently low down here, sub 40. Again, maybe we stabilize over the next coming months just above 40, under 50, but long term, I think that 50 to 60 days would be a healthy place. We won't see that until we see more inventory. And that's what I want to get into here. The projection wise, where are we going? What's this all dependent on? I don't have a crystal ball, as I say each and every time, but I do try to read the tea leaves the best of my ability. So based on what we saw in the month of December, it was stronger than expected demand. Now, why would that have happened? It's typically a down month, as we saw. I personally think that a lot of that had to do with the fact that inflation is softening a little bit and people trying to project forward. The conversations I'm having with a lot of buyers right now is even if prices do come down 5, maybe 10% over 2023, by a projection standpoint, a lot of people are talking about a recession, a depression. I don't know what's coming. Nobody does. But even if that happens, wouldn't owning a piece of real estate in a place you can enjoy or use to generate income be a pretty safe place to park whatever funds you have instead of the volatility of the stock market or any other option that you might have at your disposal? Ocean City is about as bankable as it becomes. So I think as the picture is getting a little bit clearer, as we will get deeper into 2023, I would expect a lot more people to come to that same conclusion. So I do expect that prices are going to be sticky. Now, if we jump down here to the inventory side, and then we'll come back up to mortgage rates afterwards, in January, every year, and honestly, the first of almost every month, we do see inventory drop because a lot of listings expire. When an owner signs a listing agreement, they have to put an end date. And 9 times out of 10, that end date is just the end of a month, 3 months, 6 months out. A lot tend to be the end of the year. So we saw an additional 12 properties come down, which is another 5% off of inventory. So in total, we're down 14% as of the day of this recording from our peak in October. That's substantial. And if you're looking at the news, if you're reading the newspaper, you may be seeing things that run counter to everything we're talking about here. I pulled a chart off of Zillow. I don't have it in front of me, just to see in different second home markets, what markets are seeing prices come down, which ones are going up, which ones are staying stable. A lot are going down and have been. However, Ocean City is not one of them. And whether you want to consider that an anomaly, say our time is coming, your guess is as good as mine. But ultimately, the fact that we are staying strong in the face and in comparison to these other second home markets is pretty telling to the fact that this is going to be a very hard market to hurt beyond maybe just an inch that it'll give here or there. So ultimately, if inventory continues to go down or stay roughly where it is, the demand's clearly still there. Not a ton, which brings me to something that I have said more times than I care to count. A lot of people want to buy a beach house. A lot of people talk about buying a second home somewhere. The majority never do because they're waiting for this perfect entry point, this time where it's going to be a steal and they're going to be the smart one, right? Who's buying at the low. Unfortunately, you're trying to catch a falling knife, and it's unlikely to work out in your favor that way. Please don't read that as me trying to say, if you don't buy now, you're going to regret it. Everybody's right time is different. And the problem that I see people getting into is looking into general media and headlines that don't cover the areas that they're actually focused on. And that's how they miss their opportunities. They get caught up in the noise, in the fear, and then they're not able to make the decision when they probably should have. So ultimately, this is not the best time to buy in history, right? That would have been 2 years ago. Before that, it would have been 10 years ago. Before that, 50 years ago. So ultimately, my point that I want you to understand is that we're not seeing signs that things are going to come crashing down. That doesn't mean that there's a 0% chance that that will happen. I just think it's highly, highly unlikely for that to happen or anything of that magnitude. A little teaser for what we're going to talk about next week. I personally think Ocean City will end up roughly down 5% by the end of the year in terms of pricing. I think a lot of that's going to happen at the end of the year, not so much in the coming months into the spring. So ultimately, again, only you know what your goals are, what your priorities are, and what your risk reward tolerance is going to be. So on those lines, mortgage rates, right, have taken another step back up at the end of December and the beginning of January here. And ultimately, we don't know the direction that they're going to go in. The Fed is very, very clear that they're going to most likely raise rates again in February. Does that mean there's going to be an increase in mortgage rates? It's possible. We don't know the magnitude of that. There's way more complexities at work to just be able to point to, hey, the Fed's going to raise rates, mortgage rates are going to go up. There's a lot more behind the scenes that happens with the investing world that can play into that. But ultimately, we know what's going to happen. And the likelihood of rates coming down is nearly zero in the near term. The only time that it seems that rates will come down is once we have entered, if and when we have entered a pretty sizable, painful recession. That's Jerome Powell's forecasting. That's what he's been very clear about. So I wouldn't expect to get really any break on the mortgage rate side anytime soon. And to piece this all together and to put a bow on it, if there's still demand at the mortgage rates that we have been seeing, there's not enough demand to keep inventory where it is and actually continue shrinking. What will be the domino that will turn this whole situation around, where buyers will now have more power, where sellers will still actually want to sell, and if they really want to, will feel so strongly about it or need to drop the price to a substantial degree under what the market has supported to this point. I don't know what it will take for that to happen. Second home markets tend to be a lagging indicator versus a lot of other markets where you'll see and have seen prices coming down in the end of 2022. But we've been resilient here in Ocean City to this point. And honestly, I don't know if and when that's going to change. And like I said, my personal prediction is going to be roughly in that 5% decline range by the end of the year. So with all of that said, I know that was a mouthful. This is one of the longer ones, but I had a lot to say, and I didn't feel like it would have been right to shortchange you on how I actually feel about what's happening here. So if you have any questions, you want to talk through it, you need a sounding board, I'm here for you. You can reach me any of these ways. You can always drop a comment below. That seems to be easy for some folks too. And I'd be happy to answer right there on the spot. So thank you, as always, for spending some time with me. I look forward to bringing you my predictions next week, as well as comparing exactly how close my predictions were for 2022. And we will see if I was right on track or off base entirely. So thanks again. I'll see you on the next one.